Hi there, my name's Matt and I'm here with Cancer Stories. I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. Only about 2,200 people a year get testicular cancer. It's a very rare form of cancer, very treatable. There's no national screening for it, but you can check yourself, and as I'm living proof here, you can survive it. So please watch my story. Hi there, my name's Matt. I'm 39 years old. I live in a village called Broughton Astley in Leicestershire. I've always lived in Leicestershire. I was born in Lutterworth, just down the road, but I've lived in Broughton Astley for 14 years now with my wife and my 12-year-old daughter. And in December 2013, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and this is my story.
Matt, thanks for coming in to join us on the Cancer Stories programme. We really appreciate you coming in. A couple of things that are worth mentioning at the start. I mean, first of all, you're a young person with cancer, so I'd be interested to hear how your family coped and what was the cancer journey and how did you manage, after that initial shock of the diagnosis. Yeah. But secondly, you've had a testicular cancer, and we haven't had many people in the Cancer Stories programme so far with testicular cancer. Mm-hmm. So be interesting to talk to you about any particular issues that come up with testicular cancer. But let's start with the basics. I mean, how was the cancer picked up? What was the first thing you knew about being unwell, I guess?
Yep. So I wasn't physically unwell. I'm very fortunate that my wife was a school nurse, and she teaches people about checking for themselves. And I didn't find a lump. I found what I can only describe as a slug underneath a small slug underneath, if you squashed a slug and you felt what it was like, underneath my testicle. And I obviously told my wife that I'd found it, and she said I needed to get that checked out. So I did what every man does and did nothing. Okay. And I waited a couple of weeks and the slug went away.
Oh, right.
And looking on the internet, it can often be that there's a change in the testicle which are caused by that, and it can be a symptom of cancer. But my wife forced me to go to the doctors. I went to the doctors feeling a fool, and the doctor said, rightly so, I can't feel a lump. So he said, but if we've had those symptoms that you were talking about, let's send you for tests. So I went for an ultrasound about 4 or 5 weeks later. Yeah. And that was on the Wednesday, and at 7:30 on the Thursday evening, the phone rang, and the doctor answered the phone, and I just thought in my mind straight away, the doctor doesn't phone you at 7:30 in the evening to tell you you're okay. He tells you to tell you you've got cancer. Yes. And he phoned me and he said, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is. And then they explained that the only way of truly telling whether somebody actually has testicular cancer is to cut your testicle out, cut it in half and diagnose it, and then they'll tell you. But normally they say that you're likely to have it, and they've never really removed one that hasn't had it. So that was a bit of a difficult one, because my wife and very clearly, my wife and my daughter were out supporting Santa's float and collecting money for the charities and what have you that they do with Scouts. And so I was told at 7:30, and they were out there with me, well knowing that the next night it was my night to go out and do that. So I had to wait for my family to come home. Obviously I didn't want to talk in front of my daughter, so I had to wait for her to go home. And then obviously that's when we started on our journey of understanding about what we had to do next.
That sounds like quite a sudden shock, to the system, to be pretty much well and then suddenly be told that information.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about my cancer is I've never really not felt well. I never felt ill, and I never really had, and I was very fortunate that my cancer was only 5 to 7 millimeters across, and it was completely encapsulated inside the testicle. And so, you know, yeah, it was...
I guess that's one of the paradoxes of some illnesses, but particularly testicular cancer. If you're not having symptoms, it's hard for medical staff to pick it up, you know, without a systemic screening test that's out there in the general population.
That's right, and I think that the more that you check yourself, the more that you get paranoid. The more you check yourself more frequently, the more. And again, I went through a phase, you know, in perhaps the last 6 or 7 months, where I was checking myself too frequently, which was making everything hurt, which made me worried that it had come back, and therefore I was going around that cycle. And so, you know, without that, it can be quite difficult.
So you'd had this sudden news from the GP. What was the next step?
Meltdown. So the doctor, the GP, who was lovely on the phone. I've worked for the NHS all of my life, and I melted over that time, and you know, I always remember the doctor. The only thing that the doctor said is, don't worry, because you have likely to have cancer, there are cancer pathways that make you go through the system quicker. And he mentioned the 2-week wait, and again, I often talk about whoever invented that 2-week wait was an idiot, because waiting more than a few minutes, a few days, it seems to be too long. And over that weekend, I completely melted down, ending up with the fact that my wife, being as supportive as she was, we ended up going private.
Really?
And I found out that I may have cancer on the Thursday. I obviously, you know, melted over the weekend with my wife. Very difficult conversations, because I didn't want to say anything in front of my daughter, so we would have sort of secret conversations, and my wife, being as fantastic as she is, we ended up seeing if we could get a private referral.
Yeah.
So we went, then basically found out that we went for an appointment on the Tuesday, which was one of the biggest weeks of my life, because basically I went to see and had some fantastic things to, and unfortunately confirmed that I did have testicular cancer on the Tuesday. I remember that I was presenting in London on the Wednesday, and I'd been working with 2 colleagues to prepare a 6-hour presentation, actually, for about 30 doctors, and I had a 2-hour section of that to do, and it was at Hammersmith Hospital next to Wormwood Scrubs, and I didn't tell the guys that I had cancer, because on the Tuesday I asked him how long it would wait for him to be able to operate me on the NHS, and he said 4 to 5 weeks. And I asked him, if we went private, when could he do it? And as I stopped my sentence, he said 6:30 Thursday, and I said, I'll take it. And so unfortunately, though, on the Wednesday, when I was in London, I got mugged. So as the weeks go, I found out I got cancer on Tuesday. Someone tried to mug me on Wednesday, which didn't work out too well for them, because of perhaps of the emotion that I was going through. And then on Thursday I had my operation. So it was quite a week.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So what's your reflection on actually going privately after working yourself in the NHS for some years?
I think the NHS can just needs to attempt to aspire to the treatment that we can give privately. I cannot fault any of the treatment or any of the people that I saw, and I imagine that, quite interestingly, I know that testicular cancer isn't that most people don't get testicular cancer even if they find a lump, but I live in a lovely village in Broughton Astley, but my next door neighbour was diagnosed with testicular cancer the same week that I was, and we lived next door to each other, and he stuck to the pathway within the NHS, and his was on the other testicle, so within a month we'd had our opposite testicles removed, and he stayed within the NHS and had fabulous service as well. So the thing that I couldn't wait for was the 5 weeks. So although the service was absolutely amazing that I've received, I couldn't wait. I just could not wait. I needed it out, and it was out within 6 days, which for me was the start of my recovering from cancer, which it was.
Yeah. So I'm guessing the next step was to have the surgery, and what was the surgery? To have the testicle removed?
Yep, so I had a radical orchidectomy, and as I understand, the radical part of it is the way in which they do it, which is that they take the entire thing out, basically through what I would describe as the bottom bit of your stomach. It's probably not medically right, but around the bottom here, because the idea that they can't, I thought, and everybody still thinks that when you have a testicle removed, they cut it at the bottom and take it out at the bottom. Unfortunately, because they want to keep it entire, because to make sure that it doesn't, it's the safest way for you, they cut it out through the top. And unfortunately, when they cut it out through the top, the bruising was immense, and the ball itself, no pain at all, but all of the pain. I couldn't sit up, I couldn't twist, I couldn't move. You know, it was a strange thing that unfortunately I'd been mugged the day before, and that didn't work out too well for the mug, because I was very keen on active sports before.
What happened then on that incident?
We went toe to toe, and
Really?
I told him that he might, if he wanted my laptop, he'd have to come and get it. And I told him that I was going to kill him. And I put my arms up to fight, and he ran off, and I chased him. And he ended up getting arrested, and so I had to do interviews on the morning that I had my operation with the police. But then the problem was that I'd had my operation, and running down the street after somebody trying to steal my laptop the day before, I couldn't. There was a toilet probably 3-4 yards to my right hand side, and I had 2 conversations with nurses. The first one was regarding, I'm not quite sure how I can get to the toilet, and the second one was that I needed to put my pants back on before I could go home, and I couldn't get around the idea of how that was going to happen with the pain that I was in. And you know, the humour isn't wasted on myself for those 24 hours about how different it could be.
Is that because you overdid it with that running up?
No.
It was just the recovery
process. Just the idea of having the cut there and the pain on that physical, just sitting up or moving, and actually the stomach muscles tightening your groin. I just couldn't work out how to do anything. Obviously that was obviously short pain within 3 to 4 days, and I went to work. I couldn't drive for a couple of weeks because I couldn't put foot on the clutch. But you know, it was just ironic that of lying in there 3 or 4 hours after surgery, not being able to work out the pain and get back.
What was the recovery process like after that?
So the recovery from the scar and what have you, I think is still ongoing. Recovery from only having, and then made the choice of only having one testicle, I think is still ongoing, or this time later. But the physical pains, I was driving after 2 weeks, and I was back to work after 3 weeks. And when you work for yourself, you want to get back to work as quick as you can, probably a bit too soon. But unfortunately now I suffer with, I've got an area about like that I can't feel anything around the right hand side of my groin.
Where the nerves have been cut.
Where the nerves have been cut. But every now and again I get an electric shock through it. And even to this day now, and honestly it's like a jolt of electricity, and supposedly they tell me that's the nerve endings possibly joining back together. It happens less now. But I would say that I have struggled with my demons a little bit regarding the sensation of the feel. And again, it's at the top of the sort of where the scar is, where they've cut it, but also, you know, obviously it's not a part of my body that everybody else sees, but I'm still conscious of the way that it looks. And I was asked if I wanted a prosthetic, and I purposely made a decision that I didn't want that, and I'm pleased that I didn't want that, because I've actually quite liked the idea that it looks a bit different now, but it is still something that I'm quite conscious of. You know, if I'm down the gym or training, then I keep myself to myself, if you know what I mean.
Does anyone talk to you in advance about the psychological or emotional issues about adjusting to that change in your body, facing the stigma of telling people, you know, it was a testicular cancer, or coping with other people's reactions? Did you have any input in that regard?
I didn't from the NHS, only from my wife, and I think that wasn't through understanding what it was likely to be like. Only before the cancer we spoke about the idea that I'd convinced myself that I was going to die, and so it wasn't about what was going to happen to my body. It was more about me considering what life I'd made for my family, and my consideration was purely for my wife and my daughter, and making sure that I provided well for them. But as regarding the journey afterwards, that was purely supported by friends and particularly my wife. And through the openness of talking about it, I play skittles for a local team, and everybody calls me Womble, and so as in one ball. So actually, I like the idea of actually openly talking about it, and so that it's not hidden. But it was quite difficult for a while to be for it. But I think about it less and less now, and it has become the norm after. But still think about it.
Well, the norm has become not thinking about it, not worrying about it.
Yes.
But that's a year to year and a half down the line.
That's a year and a half down the line. I would say realistically that for the first 6 months there wasn't an hour or 2 hours that didn't go by without me thinking about the consequences of cancer, or thinking about I'd turn and I'd twist and I'd feel, and that reminded me. Or the fact that everything in the world was around me having cancer. Everything I'd see on TV, every hotel room that I'd go to would have a please give to the Mary Curie, and everything was about cancer, and it reminded me of it.
You get lots of visual cues when you've had it yourself. You're on kind of red alert to that information, aren't you?
And I have that hypersensitivity to it, and looking out for those clues, and I know that they weren't about me. But realistically now, I'm 18 months away, I genuinely now go sometimes 2 days, perhaps a little longer, without thinking of cancer. And actually, when I think about the cancer now, I don't necessarily think about it as a bad thing. I think actually that I had cancer, and I know when we started on this interview we talk about that I know that from a clinical perspective, and that's absolutely right, in that you always talk about people being in remission. I don't talk about myself being in remission. I had cancer, it was removed, and all of the tests that I go on about now, I don't have it anymore. And so that's again perhaps a mindset for myself, in that yes, I did have it, but I don't anymore.
Okay, that's a very kind of positive outlook in a way. Do you think that for men it's difficult in particular, for particularly like testicular cancer or maybe penile cancer, that there's a stigma there? Did you ever feel that in society?
I think so. I think I was probably acutely aware of it. As you can probably tell, I've never been over the top with testosterone anyway. I'm 39 years old, and I can genuinely tell you that I've never shaved hair anyway. And so when you do have one chopped off, it does definitely affect your testosterone. And one thing was, the times have been going on, the Leydig tumour that I had produces estrogen, which beats your testosterone up anyway. And so they were always looking at my balances, and I've always been particularly low. And people asking me about how does it affect me in the bedroom, it's obviously a conscious thing, and it's physically I can't feel a lot of stuff on the right hand side, but to be truthful, that was in the first year, and my body's compensated, and I'm pretty much back to normal.
Was there a psychological element yourself where
Definitely.
you were worried about how things were going to be, but everything you didn't know until you tried, I guess? I don't think I'll ever return back to what I was. I'm a bit older, a bit wiser now, and just a lot of the time is about just being pleased that I've recovered and back to as normal as I could possibly be. But I can guarantee to people that actually, your body works exactly the same with one as it does with two, and it's all in your mind. That's a great reassurance to people who are potentially facing the beginning of this journey.
Yes.
And overall, how would you rate your overall recovery in terms of how much back to your normal self? How much back to 100% are you now over a year down the line?
I would say that I am more of a person now than I was before I had cancer in every aspect of my life.
Wow.
And I would say that I don't wish anybody to get cancer. I feel myself considerably lucky for the type of cancer that I get, that I got. It's a good cancer to get. It's very survivable. With that early diagnosis that I got, because of cancer, I now look after myself a lot more. I am really active. I've lost a lot of weight. I do lots more social stuff, and it was probably the kick up the backside that I needed with my business. Business is flourishing. Every part of my life is great.
That's awesome. So you didn't just survive it, you actually flourished.
Yes.
And now that's incredible. How can you explain that to somebody who's at the beginning of their journey and they're just full of those fears and worries right now?
I was too. And I think sometimes that to understand happiness, you need to have been sad. And the hours of crying with my wife, worry for your daughter, worry for the future, coping with family that aren't coping with you having cancer, and sort of talking them through and keeping them right, which is strange. It is all character building, and so you can't be happy unless potentially you've been through something and survived it. And I genuinely feel robust because I don't think there's much that could shake me now. And we've had a few ups and downs, as every family does. And I don't think it's about what you're lucky or not lucky in life. I think you get a certain deck of cards, you get your hand, and it's up to you how you play them. And I think that's for me the message, that it's those people that are starting out on those journeys, when you look on the internet, all that you get is medical advice about likelihoods and probabilities of things to happen and the pathway that you will probably go on. And those physical things happen, but that's not the important part of the journey. The important part of the journey is to talk to people, to understand what's going on, to not bottle things up. I always found the mornings very difficult. I travelled the country presenting to lots of people on maths, and those mornings when I was getting up at 5 o'clock, 5 till 7, when you can't talk to anybody on the phone because nobody else is up and you're driving places, difficult times, character building times. And I don't suffer with them so much now, but I will when in August, when I have to go back to hospital, and the 2 weeks before I go back to hospital for my armful of blood. I'm not sure if I've got to have a chest x-ray this time, but I have to have various things done. And that week I give myself time to worry. And I openly say to myself, there's nothing you can do about worry, but I give myself permission to worry for that week. So when I have my blood tests, those tests are in, and I need to go and see my oncologist the next week, I worry, and my wife knows I worry, and she allows me to worry, but we don't get consumed with it for the rest of the time.
Wow, that's a good way of looking at it. You compartmentalize your anxiety or worry time for that period, and give yourself permission to be on edge in a way, but you know that it probably will resolve if those results show that things are fine.
Yeah, and I think I've been again, as a part of the NHS, I've been given this lady called Kate Moody, who is fabulous. She is what I call sort of my probation officer. I can phone her at any time. She comes to me with all the appointments, but really her job is when I'm feeling down, she phones me, and what I get secured by are the processes to make sure that I'm not slipping through the net. So she tells me about those, and I very rarely phone her now, but in the early days I used to phone her quite a bit, and I could ask her questions and she'd tell me the right answers.
So you're talking about your clinical nurse specialist allocated from your team?
That's right.
Yeah.
I was very surprised that at the beginning of the journey, I thought it was lip service, because a lady came in and she gave me a business card and she said, hi, I'm Kate and I will be with you through your journey. And I thought, that's a lovely gesture, but I didn't think that it would happen. And it did, because every time that I phoned the office or phoned her number, she's answered. She remembers me, I think, unless she's brilliant at it. I know now that she does remember me, but even in the early days, she seems to remember me. She has obviously got access to the computer, so the things I was always started off the conversation was about, just remind me about the last blood test and what the figures showed, and then I'd tell her the real reason why I'd phoned up. So I'd use it to, I'm just phoning you up about when my next appointment is, and then I'd start to talk about her honestly, and she knew that's what I think other people have different approaches. But she's been there every step of the way, and I like the idea that if I phoned her now, she'd answer the phone and she'd tell me something sensible.
So having that consistent person who's on your side, who knows your information, is in a trusted position, that can be really valuable in seeing you through the cancer journey.
Unbelievably useful. I changed consultants. My oncologist decided to have a career change and has moved across to children, and so I was presented with a new chap, and our first interaction with each other was a bit abrasive because of my part. And when he said, "Oh, you're here for your 9 months check," I said, "No, I'm here for my 6-month check." Instantly I felt, well, you don't know me. And unfortunately, with Kate sat there, he'd said something extremely sensible, and he was a consultant oncologist, the people that are meant to know everything. And I had that good relationship with Kate. I looked across at Kate and said, "What do you think about what he said? Do you think it's right? Should we do that?" Which obviously put Kate in a very difficult position because she's the clinical nurse specialist with a consultant, and she's gone, "Yes, he's absolutely right." And so I didn't do my relationship with the oncologist probably any good, asking the nurse to say, "Should I trust in him?" And obviously we've developed our relationship since then, and I get on really well with him now.
But that just shows you, it's not just the medics who are valuable in the NHS. It's
definitely
multidisciplinary, and often the nurses and other allied health professionals have unbelievable expertise in their area, and they often have a bit more time to spend with you on a personal level. And that can be really one of the most important things, knowing somebody's there in the background, even if they're not on the phone to you all the time. It's just reassuring to know you can contact them when you need them.
Well, that's the thing about going to see your oncologist. You have a 15 or 20 or 30-minute appointment, and they always seem to be that they took the exactly amount of time that I needed, not according to the clock. But we'd go in with a list of questions, and having a list of questions is a great thing, because mine just went blank going, "Am I dying, doctor?" And then I couldn't remember any of the questions. And that opportunity with Kate was the fact that instead of having a list of 20 questions and then just keep firing at the doctor, which is, I took my wife and I said, she wrote down the questions, and I think it's a sensible thing. Having that access to Kate, I could ask that one question, phone up, and she'd answer it, and I'd put the phone down, job done, and I'd feel secure then for the rest of my time, knowing that I had the answer.
Wow, that's good. Wow, so you've been through a lot, and you had the surgery, it seemed to go well, and you fought back and got your body in a great shape. You actually said you were better compared to before the cancer, which is amazing, really. So what plans for the future now? What does the future hold for you?
Going through the cancer journey, I never really thought more than probably 4 to 5 hours ahead. I'm huge into gardening, and I'm huge into fishing, and I had no motivation for my garden because it takes months to grow things, and I couldn't see the benefit of bothering to planting anything if I should be out working because I'm going to die and I need to provide for my family. So I didn't bother with anything. I didn't make any plans. I didn't bother. And it was only through the gradual process of coming to terms with the fact that I'd had it, I'd beaten it, and it was a great opportunity to, even though I have to still go back to the hospital every 3 months, every 6 months, and I had lots of blips in there where sometimes I had to go back every 3 to 4 weeks because my tumour markers were high, or my testosterone was wrong, or my estrogen was wrong, and all of those blips, slowly after that initial thing, started to make plans. The fact that my garden flourishes now. I'm huge into fishing, and I've got a huge trip to Argentina for 10 days fishing in Argentina next year. My business is flourishing, and I've got plans and diary commitments for the next 18 months.
So it sounds like your perspective stretched out again as you became more confident after your recovery. Your perspective became longer term again, not just living for the day. Perhaps you were in hospital, but looking out towards a year or 18 months in the future.
I think people that don't suffer from cancer think that the next day is always going to come and the next year is always going to come, and I think having cancer has given me a huge insight to the fact that it doesn't, because for a year you were talking about days, I was talking about hours, and just getting to lunchtime, without sort of being able to worry about something, or what's the next thing, and just talking through the same thing with my wife, who constantly listened to me talk about the same things, to gradually talking to about next week we might go away for a few days. Oh, shall we? Yeah, okay. And then next month, and then perhaps next season. And again, a lot of things that I do work on seasons, so with the weather and this sort of thing. And so thinking about how that's going to work, it slowly comes back. But now the idea being that actually I've been given a second chance, make the best of it. And if you plan for something, it's likely to happen. If you don't plan for something, it probably has less chance of happening. And so again, that idea that I couldn't be bothered to plan is now the emphasis about, well, take charge, because whether you've got a little bit of time or a lot of time, it's still time, and do something with it.
What do you think are the key changes that have happened to you over this last year and a half? What do you think has been the major effect of cancer on your life as a whole?
I think I was pretty much a man's man. I think I could have been a bit abrasive before. I think that I perhaps didn't value a lot of the things that were probably worth valuing. My wife says now that I'm a lot more gentle. I don't know if I am or not. I don't know whether that's I've just had my testosterone cut to bits, but I think it's probably the fact that I appreciate everything and everyone a lot more now. And I just think it is, like I say, is that gift to think, you may not be here for a long time. I was always under the impression that there's unfortunately been a lot of cancer in my family. And when I got cancer at the age that I did, I accepted that was probably going to be the norm, although my family had suffered from different sorts of cancers, usually self-induced sorts of cancer through smoking or drinking, which I do neither of. And so when I got one that it sort of fitted into timescales, I just accepted that was the case, and that is not the case. Cancer was something that I had. Cancer isn't you, it doesn't define you, but it's certainly been good for me.
Wow, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Well, look, Matt, I find your story just incredible, because you talk about the whole thing in a very sensible, down-to-earth way, but what you've been through is really powerful. But what really comes home to me is that change in you from before and after. You've actually almost grown as a person. You actually feel that there are some advantages to having your diagnosis, and you've lived through that threat and that adversity and turned it into something that is almost, well, it is a positive. It's a positive in your life, and I can see, you flourishing after your diagnosis, which is terrific. And I'm sure people watching this will be really inspired by your whole story. So thanks for coming in today and sharing your account. I really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best for the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.